to the second webinar in the series of webinars that we're holding in partnership with CPEC on dialogues on the future of work in the Global South, building narratives from the Middle East and North Africa. We've just completed the first session on the skills panel, and today we're very privileged and honored to be hosting expertise from the region to talk to us about the technology aspect of things. The session is going to be moderated by Dr. Mustafa Nabhi, and we will have as our panelists Dr. Shahrokh Pardus, Dr. Jem Demello, and Dr. Sharif Kamel. Unfortunately, Dr. Farah Shokir could not join us due to a sudden illness. The session will be recorded and be shown live on the ERF YouTube channel. And should you wish to address the panelists with any questions or comments during the session, please do so by using the Q&A section, or at any point in time, you can also raise hand and the floor will be given to you to intervene directly. And with that, I give the floor to Mustafa to coordinate accordingly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Shireen. Do you need to keep this?
No, we'll remove the slide, please, Boulos.
Yeah.
Boulos, please stop sharing the screen.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Welcome to everybody, and for this dialogue session. And I'm pleased to be invited here by the group to moderate this session. Let me say a few words as an introduction. We are past the time when we could say that the fourth industrial revolution is coming. We can no longer say it when a real-size, real-life bridge produced by 3D printing is installed for pedestrians to walk over in Amsterdam. I think you have seen that. It's amazing. We are past time when we talk about the future of work, and that the future of work is going to be different. We can no longer say that when millions of people now conduct their work and business from anywhere in the world, as the pandemic has so forcefully demonstrated. The future is here, and the world of work, of business, the world of home is different already for billions of people. There's no doubt about it. It's here now. We are here today in this session to try to understand how this is happening, how it is affecting the lives of people, how and whether countries, businesses, and individuals are adapting, taking advantage, or missing the boat. There are those who are at the forefront, participating in the innovations, leading them, taking advantage of them, and those who are following, and still others who are lagging much behind. The global picture is so diversified and complex that one needs to step back and reflect on what is going on. And that is the objective of this session. Our objective today is try to understand and look forward on how best to adapt, how best to take advantage, and how best to avoid being left behind. So this session is kind of brainstorming session from a select number of panelists to guide us to try to reflect, stepping back and reflect on what is happening in the global of the new technology and the new technologies, actually, because it's not one, it's many technologies, and how this is affecting us, affecting our work, affecting our lives, and affecting our economies. So I am pleased that we have an excellent panel who are going to guide us and specifically dealing with the MENA issues, how MENA is doing on these issues, and how it is or it's not adapting, how it is or it is not taking advantage, how it is or it is not falling behind. It's all of that probably all at the same time, depending on where you are, on what you are talking about, and which technologies, and so on. So we have this wonderful group, and we have, unfortunately, one of our panelists who was not able to join us because of health reasons, and we wish her the best. She was our only woman on the panel, and unfortunately, she was not able to join us today. So our first panelist is Sharaf Fardoust, and Sharaf, I think you know him all, and he's now professor at the College of William and Mary in California. And Sharaf is a former World Bank economist and many other things at the World Bank, and he has been working on international trade, on technology issues, and so on. And he is an active member of the ERF community. So we agreed that each one of the panels will have about 15 minutes in this introductory session. And after this, everyone speaks for 15 minutes. I give a few minutes to each one of them again to respond to what the others have said, and maybe add something or subtract something. And then we open it for questions and answers to the participants. So Sharaf, it's yours.
Okay. Thank you, Mustafa. I would like to share my screen if it's okay, and just a few slides I would like to focus on. I think let me see if I can find this. Okay, let me just go to the first slide. Okay. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I put a timer, so I finish in 15 minutes. But I would like to take this.
Would you like to put it on full screen?
No, it's fine like this because I can manage it this way if it's okay with you. As long as you can see the slide, the main slide, that's fine.
That's fine.
No, it's fine.
So the issue is that I wanted to give a context to our discussion, and very quickly discuss some of the major trends of digitalization and how it is interacting with the economy. But then wherever it's possible, I mentioned the connection to the MENA region. Basically, the most important thing to know is that digitalization has already started to play a very important role. It was already the trend of digitalization was, upward around the world, but it has intensified since the COVID recession. And while the global economy is now beginning to recover as a result of the policy interventions, it had a 5.8% drop in the world GDP in 2020, and in 2021 there is expectation that it was 3.5% decline, and there is expectation that there will be a very sharp recovery as a result of the actions taken. But this recovery has been uneven, and this unevenness across countries has to do with their policies, initial conditions, but also to a large extent to the access to digital technology, which has turned out to be extremely important in a world of social distancing and lockdowns. Of course, future is highly uncertain, although there is hope that with the vaccination going forward and the number of vaccines have developed, the recovery will continue. But then there's new variations that have come, the Delta variations, for example. There is a concern. So the path forward is kind of going to be patchy, and perhaps also it would be causing more inequality both between countries and within countries on how they were able to, depending on how they were able to deal with COVID, and on the degree to which they had access to this new technology, the digital technology. Now, the other point that I wanted to point out is that the recession this time around in 2020 has been much more sharper in terms of drop in growth rate for developing countries than it was the 2008-2009 financial crisis. Actually, the low-income countries, the blue column in this chart shows that low-income countries were able to continue to grow in excess of 4% during the 2008-2009 crisis. But this time around, their growth has shrunk very sharply. And also the emerging market economies, excluding China, is experiencing a very sharp drop in 2020. So developing countries have been hit much harder. Recovery is on the way based on the policies that have been taken, and the growth rate is being restored, but the level of GDP, which is in this chart is depicted by this orange line, is going to be significantly below the original path, which is the blue line, even by the end of 2022. They will be by then still the world GDP would be $3 trillion below where it would have been otherwise. Now, digitalization is an important set of technologies. It is continuously morphing into new things, and it's disrupting old activities into new activities, and it is beauty of it is kind of a general purpose technology, and it is has two very important attributes, which is both opportunity and risk, because they are labor saving and they're highly skill biased, these technologies. So they have to be managed through policy in order to basically increase the opportunities and reduce the risks to the global economy and individual countries. The main areas where affecting the developing countries, especially now, the first generation of these technologies affecting future of work, the financial technology, the fintech, e-government, e-commerce, how it's affecting businesses, and to some extent also is affecting the agriculture sector through better management of water and other resources. Now, the time path for, if you look at it broadly in the sense of fixed broadband evolution, which is actually quite important, more important than mobile technology, because broadband actually gives you access to a lot more data and information and platforms than just a mobile technology, but they do complement each other. As you can see, the advanced economies, the dark blue line has been rising, and the subscription per 100 inhabitants is now almost by second quarter of 2020 has reached about 35%, while developing countries, which is world minus advanced economies, the gray line is significantly lower, hardly reaching 10 subscriptions per 100 inhabitants. But important thing to note that the gap has not narrowed, but hasn't widened either when you look at it from an aggregate point of view. Another set of data, which I quickly summarize for you, it's done by European Commission, which looks at 5 indicators of digitalization: connectivity, which is it has several indicators under it; human capital, which are the skills that you need to handle those technologies; internet services, or like social service, social networks, FaceTime and so forth, Twitter. Integration of technologies is e-commerce, and digital public service is basically e-government. I mean, basically these look at the different aspects, not just connectivity, but go beyond that, how it's used actually. And if you aggregate these indices and normalize them, you get a very, very diverse set of results, in a sense that in this chart, of course, a score of 100 would have been 100 on each of those 5 indicators. The top 4 in European Union, which includes the Nordic countries and the Denmark and so forth, it scores high. Iceland scores high, Norway scores high, and US comes next, then Switzerland, UK, and so forth. So that's the top echelon. Then the second group includes Canada, Japan, Korea, and then comes into the emerging market economies, which is the lower part of the chart: Israel, Chile, Russia, China, Serbia, Mexico, Brazil, and then Turkey, because these are based on the data connected by EU and OECD. It doesn't have all of the developing countries, but I would just say that based on the data that I have seen for Middle East, I think GCC countries would rank in the middle and a little bit higher than the middle. EU would be higher than the middle. And then the rest of the Middle East would be probably where Brazil and Turkey are now. The different set of indicators have been followed by UNTAD, and they were reported in its recent report on digitalization, which also shows a big gap between the least developing countries, which are the gray lines, and the advanced economies, the orange line, and developing countries as a whole, which is the blue line, across different sets of, these are basically focusing on access, digital access, and this is data as of 2018, 2019. An important indicator that I wanted to point out to you is actually based on the very recent work done by the World Bank in the context of the World Development Report in 2021, which is on data and development. And one of the background studies for that report had a survey that basically try to find out what are the factors that affect demand for access, demand for internet use, and so forth, not just the supply side. And here, very interestingly, they find that the orange component, which is basically digital literacy, this is basic literacy to be able to handle, Facebook or Twitter or read an email. These are basic digital. It's not advanced literacy. Basic literacy accounts for 70% of the demand as a determinant of demand. So not having that literacy, even if the services are made available to you, you will not be able.
You have 3 minutes left, Sarah.
Yes, thank you. So that is, I think, the focus should be on also human capital, which is quite important. And this final chart is the basically based on the latest OECD report on digitalization, which indicates 2 things, very important things within the advanced economies, that there is a divide within the advanced economies. There are the penetration rate among the top echelon of advanced economies is much higher than those which are at the bottom. So there's a huge spectrum of basically penetration rates across even advanced economies, let alone between advanced economies and developing countries. The second point, the second chart on the right, shows that actually the access also varies hugely among firms. The smaller firms have a lot less access than the larger firms in advanced economies. Final slide, just summarizing very quickly. is that there is no doubt that reliable and high quality digital connectivity is of fundamental importance, and that's where the focus should be. But policymakers should be cognizant of the fact that if they want to benefit from this technology, and I mean the populations of the countries to be benefiting, there has to be ways to increase the connectivity for rural areas, for lower income people, for women, and for backward parts of the country where the connectivity is very low, because otherwise the inequality that is there is going to increase. And up to now, it is very clear that COVID-19 pandemic has actually been a game changer in this regard, has basically brought the digital technology in focus and has also demonstrated its benefits as well as its potential risks and inequality that could increase over time. Now, we will, in the follow-up discussion, I hope that we will have time to talk about the labor issues and some of the policy issues related to how one can actually enhance productivity response and reduce inequality that could come out of lack of access. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharaf, and thanks for keeping to the time. And we go to our second panelist. If you can leave the screen sharing, Sharaf. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Our second panelist is Jim Demello. Most of you know Jim. He has been a long-time friend of ERF, and he has been involved with ERF for many, many years. And Jim is also a long-time professor at the University of Geneva. He's now emeritus professor, but he has been involved in the development area, especially in international trade, with his work, which is very well known, and he has been active on many, many places, which will be too long to explain and to develop here. He has been a CPR fellow in particular, and involved in Brookings and other institutions. So Jim, it's yours, please.
Do you hear me?
Yes, excellent.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Are we sharing the screen? Wait. I'm sorry. Share. Is that okay? Does it work?
Yes.
Yes.
Why do I see? Okay, let's see.
We see it. We see.
Yeah, but okay. Now, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm not so sure I have very much to say that would be new to any of you. In any case, I have learned already quite a lot by listening to Sharok. So what I'm going to try to do is, I've been trying to think about some things that you may not have seen already, or that some of them are relatively recent. And the second is, I'm all the time going to try to talk as much as I can just about MENA. But when I talk about MENA, I would sometimes compare MENA's contribution or MENA's performance to other countries. So the outline you have right in front of you, it starts from the two challenges that have been identified in, some may call, the fourth industrial revolution, globotics, and disappearance of jobs. Now, what is I find interesting is that MENA and Sub-Saharan Africa are the two regions in the world that have been the less involved or participated the least in global value chains, in several measures of global value chains. So I'm going to try and talk based on, can we find, or do we have some clues or some suggestions as to why that might be so? So I start with some recent work done on what is called submarine cables and the identification of firms. Do they have access to, do firms have access to internet? And there I'm going to give you some comparisons that show that MENA firms are really not digitally isolated compared to others. These are rather large samples. So the problem is not there, at least relative to other regions. But on the other hand, MENA has been lagging on data, which is, we know, central to the digital economy. More and more, what goes on with digitization or digitalization, which is another aspect of the digital economy, is that you need to produce data. You sell and you exchange, but you're also producing data, and having data is really quite central. And here, I'll be very often, you'll see that I'm stealing some information or some slides from Bernard Hoekman and others, and that'll be indicated in the outline. So then, seeing what happened, well, if you look at specialization in services, we find that relative to other regions, MENA specialized more in transportation and travel services. And so the question is maybe, well, you know what, why should that be so? So I ask a few questions about what this may suggest. And then I go on to 4 different possible, let's say, possible explanations. I mean, explanations might contribute to it. So let me go rather fast through the slides. The first slide, of course, is the slide on, well, you know, you've had automation and globalization with Digitech, which is means that it's much easier to get into services trade. And this has been accelerated, as Sharok already said before, by work from home spurred by COVID. So COVID has been, if anything, accelerating what was already happening. But the problem is, in order to benefit or to get into this, you need to have connections, which is the case for MENA, but you need servicification, which is not as pronounced as in some other region. Linkages, which could be to universities, also to have a good regulatory environment, and also technology adoption. And in technology adoption, the last 2 slides, I will be showing some information on what has been the rate at which different countries in the world have been adopting 1G, 2G, 3, 4, and 5G telecom. It's interesting to see the changes. The second part is the disappearance of jobs, which is what this seminar is all about. I'm not going to talk a lot about that, very little, but of course, one of the main points that have been discussed in the literature is that there's a huge machine learning and AI present a huge challenge, and the huge challenge is especially for those activities which cannot be based on not rule-based logic. So for those that are rule-based logic, well, then you may be losing a lot of jobs. For the others, not as much. So continuing quickly, this is the slide that I find rather arresting. This is data that we have. It's not very good, but it's still the best that we have. And we go from 1990 to 2015. So I'm looking at both ends. And there I have 2 slides. One on the left, in this slide, I have two parts. The left-hand side is talking about how much global value chain participation is that is regional on the vertical axis and horizontal, which is on the regional axis. So the vertical axis is non-regional. What do you see is almost all increase in GVC participation in MENA, and also, but only there, has been non-regional. Whereas in others, it's been either more even or it's been really regional, as you can see in Central Asia and Africa. Then if you look at another, again, the same data set, you see that MENA, they stand out, not surprisingly, you'll tell me, as stand out as forward participation. What is forward participation? It is a case in which most of your exports go down as an input into exports from the country to which you are exporting. So of course, with a lot of primary-based exports, this is not surprising. Now, you see this, and they are quite different. You see there are quite different patterns to the other regions. So you can say MENA, but also sub-Saharan Africa stand out relative to obviously East Asia, but also to ECA and also to Latin America. So first question now, suppose you take the data, this is done by this paper I just referred to, we look at the connection of all the data, all the firms in the World Bank economic survey, 25 to 60,000, 30,000, and you look at the average distances to SMC, to submarine cable landing facilities in 1995 and 2015. What you see that East Asia Pacific were very far initially, and then they became very close. This is China and East Asia. But then what you do see is that MENA, which is on the bottom part, is very close. Now you're telling me maybe that few firms, maybe this selection, but it's certainly not a problem relative, at least relative to other parts of the world. So they're not digitally isolated in that narrow sense. Now, where, on the contrary, they are quite different, and here you see that this is stolen from Hoekman. This is a slide from one of Bernard's presentations, in which he said, but look at the average rate of increase in servicification in the Arab countries is lower than the rest of the world. And also services in GDP are lower, okay, than in other middle-income countries, not only that, but also they are specialized in transportation and travel services. So this leads him to say, well, you know, this is maybe a red flag if you want to think about the digital economy. So why weak GVC performance? I don't have anything new to say about that. The literature suggests that trade costs are very important. This can be red tape, rent seeking. There's a lot of that has been written on that. But you might add that it's certainly not, it doesn't look like it's physical connectivity when I discuss the submarine cable information. Now, why is it that they have, let's say, specialized in tourism and transport-like services? Well, we may have several reasons that need not be discussed here, but it turns out that this specialization is probably not conducive to further developments in the digital economy. So can that change? Bernard, in one of the papers he wrote for, I think it was for ERF, I'm not sure, or ARC, he says, well, he thinks that there is a human capital that's necessary to have an upsurge in the services, the digital economy in MENA, provided, maybe not all MENA countries, but beyond the GCC, but of course, providing that you have an enabling environment. So what I'm going to do is just go very quickly through my last 4 slides, which one of them you probably already seen many times. It's the one on the smile curve. You know the smile curve, okay, the smile curve is developing countries don't want to be stuck in the middle where the production stage where you add very little value added. The first example of that was the iPod years back. But if you're stuck in the middle, then you have little value added in the global value chain, so that is a problem. So what can you do? Well, one of the things you can do is try to flatten the curve. And so you can say, well, either some, not all, but some MENA countries might get stuck in the middle, or they might try to adopt policies, or might try to change the current situation, which is, as we saw earlier, very little participation in the supply chain trade. So you look at that, and well, you look at all the standard diagrams that are used increasingly to discuss digitalization and servicification, and there you see that if you really want to have to participate, there are going to be a lot of adjustment pressures, and the question is, are there also opportunities for new entrants? And that is something that there is some information, but the information in MENA and elsewhere, but also is not as much as we'd like to have in order to make some sort of policy recommendations or further explanations of why MENA is not doing so well. So what you see on the right-hand side here is that will the middle part of the smile curve, will it be shortened through reshoring or other activities? And that is, again, a question that is wide open. So what do we know? Well, we don't know much about policies. We don't know as much about policies as we'd like to. And here you have some data, again, from a paper by Hookman and Shepard that just shows that basically there has been very little liberalization of trade in services. And if anything, nothing has changed. And furthermore, what we don't have is the data that will allow us to see changes through time. Here, it's just a cross-section and not even for the same year across countries. So we still have a lot to learn about. Now, what we do have is a bit of information on data transfer policies, as I mentioned very much at the beginning. Gathering data and having data and transferring data is very important. And you can see here that the green countries, and there are not too many green countries, although there are some in the MENA region. So the question there is, how can you get a good regulatory environment? And Bernard and others have written on this, and Sharok also made some recommendations on that. So this is maybe a little harder to, this is just came out last week. I find that quite interesting. This is the technology adoption. So the technology adoption, so this is in telecom. So, you started in 1980, 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. So you have this all around the world, and this database, you have the link there, just says how long it takes for a certain number of countries to reach a certain, or to be part of the digital or the chain that's prevalent at the time. So now we're into 5G, and there you have thought about the situation by looking here at the situation in Tunisia. I thought maybe you'd be interested to see the Tunisia. So if you look at Tunisia, you see the 5 lines. The 5 lines indicate each year when each of the five different technologies were introduced, and what is the rank of the country. So the higher rank, the better off you are. So a high rank means going up the scale. So you see, they were about 100, Tunisia, and then they went up and then came down, and then afterwards, at each stage, you see a little blip and then they come down. But what you do see is that in this particular case, Tunisia is not doing particularly well. It's just typical average. Mustafa will tell us more about that maybe. But if you look at that, then you take all this data and then you ask the question, what they do in that paper, they develop an index. And this index is an index of the regional evolution. So you take an average, this is a simple average of the countries in each region to see where they stand, and surprising, North American, Canada at the top. And you see that ECA has also done pretty well in blue, and MENA has not been doing too well, and they've, if anything, been falling since 2008, and Sub-Saharan Africa is rather stagnant. However, this is, I think, the interesting part, is if you take foreign competition rather than this index, but also if you use the index as a proxy for liberalization, then you can check what are the correlates of increases in technology adoption. So what they show in that paper, increases in technology adoption only occur when there is foreign competition combined with regulatory independence. Now, this is just the beginning, but it's an interesting, I think it's quite interesting if you are if you are trying to develop a better understanding for what might be driving the adoption of the technologies in MENA. So I will stop here saying this is what I chose to talk about. And I hope I haven't taken too long and that some of these are, if not new, at least it may help us think about some of the challenges facing MENA. Thank you. Do I have to do something or you take the thing back? I stop share, right?
Yes.
I did.
Thank you, Jim.
Dr. Mustafa, you're on mute.
Thank you so much, Jim, and it's great. A little bit over time, but not by much. It's excellent. I think the messages are clear and the developments are very interesting. Now we have our last but not least of our panelists, Dr. Sharif Kamel. And Dr. Sharif is a professor of management, and he's also the dean of the business school at the American University in Cairo. Dr. Sharif has a long and distinguished career in many areas in government, in the university, in academia, in private sector, and I think he has a lot to tell us about what's happening in on the ground, because he has been involved on the he's the work on the ground, so he's going to tell us what's going on the ground. Dr. Sharif, it's yours.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction, and I would like also to thank the previous speakers for really sharing some insightful sort of updates and views on what is happening globally and also in the region. Let me just start by saying for several decades, whenever we spoke about disruption, we always referred to information and communication technology. At some point, it was the internet, and then a few years back, we started talking about the fourth industrial revolution and how it can impact different sectors in the economy: manufacturing, agriculture, health, education, and so on and so forth. And increasingly, it has been affecting the way we work, the way we study, the way we communicate, the way we shop, until 2019 came. And disruption came in a different form and shape. We call it COVID-19, with all that it came with it. Was it a wake-up call? Was it the minute where we started accelerating really faster our use of technology? The fact is, COVID-19 did not discriminate. Developed world, developing world, everybody got affected, obviously with different degrees. It slowed down economies, affected businesses, disrupted value chains, and it changed the lives and livelihoods of so many people around the world. Well, this actually forced many people, including business owners, policymakers, to try to adapt, to try to think, maybe to change. And the reason why I say maybe to change, because people usually want to change. They talk about change, they promote change, but they never want to change. But I think something different happened in 2019 and 2020. And I think this is here to stay, for some at least. And I cannot generalize because we've seen so many different variances across different parts of the world. But for sure, when it comes to MENA, and this is going to be my focus, more or less zooming on MENA and getting examples from Egypt as well. More and more people are using technology than before. So we're really living the age of acceleration. I have to confess here, Dr. Mustafa actually, when in his introduction, mentioned my work in IT. Well, the likes, me, my colleagues, IT directors, researchers, CTOs, CIOs, for many, many years worked in the IT sector. We actually failed in what COVID-19 managed to do in no time, which is the really push for the acceleration of technology across different businesses, different societies. Apparently, COVID-19 had a much, much bigger impact. But I want to look at this as an opportune moment. What can happen next? Is this a game changer? If yes, for who? And what needs to be done? In MENA, we're addressing the notion of the impact of today, the impact of digital transformation and the future of work. And as it was said in the beginning, the future of work is now. And we need to keep an eye when we engage in those conversations, the important fact that we should not, while thinking of that, exacerbate the divides that we have in the society. And the divides are not only digital, and I'm going to come into that in a few minutes. I want to stop just for a minute and look back. Did digital transformation start with COVID-19? Did the acceleration start with COVID-19? I think it started years and years ago. I think it started in 1980 when the first PC was invented, the personal computers, and we started having computers at home. We started working from home. Obviously, it got a massive boost with the development of the internet, and we started having the digital organizations in its early form, the internet with enterprise, and the proliferation of technology diffusion, the technology adoption, and technology adaptation. Then came the mobile. Then came the fourth industrial revolution with its AI and big data analytics, cloud computing, Internet of Things, and the like. This has been going on for years. So the acceleration aspect might have taken a major notch and over the past year or so, but it has been there. It has been increasingly being integrated in our lives. I mean, what, 16 years ago, Tom Friedman wrote The World is Flat. And then he came like 10 years later and he wrote The Age of Acceleration. Well, that has been happening. Over 15 years ago, 1 billion people were on the internet. I call it the digital continent, Facebook, 2.5 billion people today, but it also started in 2006. But I think 2007 was a key year where so many platforms for connectivity, collaboration, and the creation of opportunity. And that's a key point here that I'm going to come into it when it comes to the MENA and the access to technology versus the adoption and the creation value out of technology. 2007, we've seen the creation of iPhone, but also Android and Kindle and Airbnb. So the acceleration has been in the direction of more power, more outreach, more speed, a world with no time or distance barriers. Today, what are we looking at? We're looking at the rate of change of technology versus societal readiness, the human adaptability, and the adoption of technology. I'll give you an example from MENA and how I see the space unfolding. Has there been investment in ICT infrastructure over the last many years? Absolutely, yes. But if you look at the adoption, it is largely based on individual basis. Mainly youth. We call them digital first or digital natives. And I'm not gonna dwell on what kind of use, but it's mainly access. There is a growing and promising adoption by tech-enabled startups across different sectors and across different parts of the region. But yet the scale is not that big to offer a significant impact. Early state adoption of electronic government services. Obviously, there are countries that are ahead of others, mainly in the GCC region, but then there is bits and pieces of e-government application. And collectively, I would say insignificant ICT adoption level by private sector enterprises, small and medium-sized enterprises. I'll give you an example. For example, in Egypt, there are close to 3.5 million micro and small and medium-sized enterprises, with only 1.7 are formal, with around 6 million people working there. The adoption of technology to create value is by and large insignificant. Maybe there are bits and pieces here and there. Many of them are actually one of the new tech-enabled startups, but then again, we cannot say that there is a significant ICT adoption amongst the private sector, especially small and medium-sized enterprises, which actually represents the vast majority of businesses across the entire region, and not only in Egypt. Let me zoom in a bit more on Egypt. What needs to be done for us to try to benefit and create value of this digitalization trend? It has to have a sustainable and scalable impact. But to start with, as I said earlier, it cannot exacerbate the already existing problems and divides that we have. So what we need is actually an affordable, universal access to ICT infrastructure across the country. But much more important than technology infrastructure is the required skill set, the human capital, and the readiness, not just to access, but also to use whatever in their work or whatever they're doing. But more importantly, the enabling and supporting environment, the legal, the regulatory, the governance, the security. This whole ecosystem needs to be there. And also looking at MENA from a cultural perspective, a trust in technology. This does not come at the push of a button. This is a whole process, an ecosystem that has to be created before we can start reaping the benefits of actually digitalization. If I move in, and again, this is a point that sort of important to mention and should not be taken for granted. Digitalization of the status quo does not mean much without the right policies, the creation of opportunities, the streamlining of processes, the increased efficiencies, and helping at least the competitiveness edge. Because digitalizing the status quo means, with this functionalities, would simply mean digitalized dysfunctionalities. But that cannot take place, and that is taking time more than it should. And I think answering one of the questions that we're discussing today, are we losing pace? I want to say we need to do much more, much faster, because technology and the pace of technology development adoption is actually extremely fast. When I mentioned the inequalities and the divides that are available in the society, not just digital, but also reaching out the underprivileged and remote locations. Some segments of the community that are less privileged than others, including youth and including women, is also extremely important. So I want to just give a few very quick examples on looking at the future work based on some recent study done by McKinsey, and the number, for example, of automatable full-time jobs in Egypt. It's close to 12 million full-time jobs. Which means that obviously digitalization is going to help create some new jobs, adjust some current jobs, but also suspend or retire some other jobs. But the key here is upskilling and reskilling. The vast majority of automatable jobs in Egypt are basically in the two sectors that employ the largest amount of people, which is manufacturing and agriculture. Looking at the space of education and technical education specifically is extremely important. The examples are so many, I can give so many examples, but we can look at agriculture and how basic technology deployment for both high-end farming and also for small farmers can benefit from the information that could be shared, the pricing that should be shared, the tips on the weather condition that could be shared, but also improving the quality of the outcome, which actually can also, looking at logistics and transportation and the other elements, going back to Jamie's point, can help some of the countries in the region to have a more significant role and impact in global value chains, which is currently hardly existing. AI in the context of Egypt through precision agriculture could be extremely important, which at this point is still hardly scratching the surface. So you would get the sense from what I'm saying, it's all about the potential rather than what is happening on the ground. Some, again, most recent startups coming up in different sectors, including, for example, agriculture, is creating online communities to try to educate farmers on how to benefit from even simple technologies, including smartphones and the like, not getting into AI and even IoTs and so on. When it comes to manufacturing, highly unexplored, absolutely unexplored when it comes to ADPs and advanced technologies. Retailing, we've seen bits and pieces. Transportation and logistics will probably come first, and we've seen a number of startups also coming up through over the past few years. But yet again, as I said, the impact is hardly significant because also of the scalability of the market in Egypt. One important element that maybe has gained ground over the past 10 years is actually financial inclusion. You look at Egypt, for example, 102 million people, less than 32% of the adult population, which is 16 plus, actually have a bank account. that leaves a whole lot outside that the bank segment. Financial fintechs and financial inclusion has been growing over the past few years. We have a number of startups that actually gained ground on that space, and I expect that would also help, not just bringing those into the bank community, which is not the most important point, but also the informal sector, which is at least 50% in the case of Egypt. Some of it can actually move to the formal economy. I want to wrap up by actually addressing a program that is called Digital Egypt, that was launched in 2018, that tries to look at whatever I addressed over the past five or 7 minutes on digital transformation. It includes part that has to do with the skill set, part that has to do with supporting entrepreneurship and innovation, and a part that has to do with government and trying to use technology, not just to be efficient, but also to cut down on red tape, bureaucracy, and also combating corruption. Part of the program is actually building a network that can, a fiber optic network that can link not just the government facilities, but more important in my view, the 4,000 plus villages, which can be a true game changer when it comes to the inclusive development aspect and bringing in the remote and underprivileged segments of the community that are out there, not connected, don't have even opportunities. That can create opportunities for them, not just through the access, but also the creation of opportunities behind the access. The space is changing, maybe slower than it should, but most of what we can talk about digitalization is more the potential that can happen. A lot of work that needs to happen, and it's not just about tech access, but it's the ecosystem that needs to be created, and that needs a lot of work and obviously a lot of resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharif. So we have 3 excellent presentations. I would like to go back to each one of you and ask you to say anything that you'd like to add, respond to, comment about of what your other colleagues said. And I would like to add my touch to this response. I would like to give you a challenge question. I would like to ask each one of you to tell us, give a response, yes or no, clear one, yes or no. Are the many countries missing the boat on this technological revolution? Yes or no? What do you think? And give me an answer that is a consultant answer, not a researcher answer. A consultant answer, yes or no, and why do you think so? In 1 minute. In 1 minute, just like that. Don't make it like a complex, just what's your feeling about it? Your gut feeling, given what you know, and maybe you don't know much about it, but anyway, you have seen a few things. You have, and so I would like this to be engaging the discussion from the audience. And by the way, I would like the audience to go to the question and answer part and put in their questions that we will come back to in a few minutes after we hear from you in this round for 2 or 3 minutes each. And we start with Sharaf.
Okay, Mustafa, to answer your question, I would say yes to missing the boat, but at this time, with the current set of conditions, of course, things vary across the region, but overall, yes, the region is missing the boat. On one issue that I wanted to touch upon is productivity, because there has been a lot of discussion about how digitalization is affecting productivity. And of course, if you look at the overall aggregate data, you don't see much effect. But when you look at detailed data at enterprise by enterprise, it is very clear that those industries, those sectors, and those firms within those sectors that have digitalized deeper, more rapidly, they have gained productivity growth. And The latest empirical work, which has just been published by the IMF, shows that cross-country effect of digitalization is if you increase digitalization by, that includes access and usage, by 1 percentage point, you will accelerate GDP growth by 0.3% in 2 years' time. There's a 2 years lag because between the investment and utilization. So there is a clear effect that is there. In the next round, if you had time, I'd like to say something about inequality.
Okay, great. Thanks. Jim, yours?
Let me am I on mute or not?
We hear you. We hear you.
You hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mustafa, for this great question. And I would say that I agree. I agree with Sharok, but I would just add that the reason for me saying so is I still feel that in many ways the type of learning that you need to get into a service economy and to do this digital transformation is different from the type of learning that you used to do often by rote, even in Europe, relative to Anglo-Saxon countries, among the rich countries. I'm exaggerating, but certainly was probably the case in the MENA region. So Timur Kuran and others have written on that extensively, and I think it's still pervasive today. So my reason for saying they missed it is probably the education, even though there may be learning, who knows, maybe it'll unleash, everyone will get on the computer and know how to use information technology for the right stuff rather than for the wrong stuff. So that's my answer. My answer to that, and also my general comments. My comment, I could also add, well, there's been a lot of good work showing that the crony capitalism and so on, which we know happens everywhere, not just in MENA, but that also might also be part of the problem. So I don't have many other comments to add, but I enjoyed very much the presentations by the others and learned quite a bit, even though I don't think we have enough of a counterfactual to say this is there we can show a case where it worked, as we do in some other cases.
Great, thanks, Jim. Dr. Sharif.
Well, I'm an optimistic person, yet I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna agree with my colleagues, which is sad. It is a huge challenge, and yes, I think we're missing the boat. I just hope that the boat is not going very fast, so that the gap is not that huge and getting bigger. I think this is an opportune moment, and unless we can see that whatever directions, policies, intentions that came through over the last year are still there in a year's time, and we're not just on the spur of the moment as a reaction of what happened. And unless they're there, we're definitely missing the boat. I do not see digitalization in MENA taking a solid value-added shape or form unless the environment is government-enabled, period, but private sector-led and information-driven. And going to James' point, information-driven in a region, and I'm being blunt, education is still what is being taught, how it's being taught is way off track, and it does not come close to what is needed to live in a future-oriented environment that is affected by technology and innovation and so on and so forth. So I go back to the point, it's not the hardware, it's not the software, it's not the network, it's the human capital and the investment in human capital and innovation that is key. And if you judge by that, then we're surely missing the boat.
Thanks. Let me bring in my take on this one. on this question. My view is that, and this is not a researcher question answer, right? It's not. It's.
You have to say yes or no.
I think MENA is not missing the boat on the consumption side, on the consumption sphere, but it is missing the boat on the production sphere. MENA is highly engaged in the consumption sphere. I mean, MENA people are engaged in the new technologies. The people are engaged. The MENA has the highest rate of use of presence on the social media, the highest presence and use of technology, of smartphones, and very high use by individuals for their own use for consumption. But it is on the consumption, on the production sphere that the problem is. Whether, as Dr. Sharif has explained very, very eloquently, in the private sector, and in the production, in the SMEs and large enterprises are not adopting technologies to change their business processes, to produce new products, to change their business models, to deliver services, including by government, by the way. I include government as in the production sphere. E-government to me is production sphere in the government sector. It's in these areas that the missing of the boat is taking place. But by the individuals users, by the consumers and the individuals, I think many people are champions in many, many ways. And so that's the paradox, I think, that we have to explore and to go into as much as possible. So maybe we can come back to this later. I have one question by Anne Moisan, and who asks, is the China infrastructure investment, the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, with MENA and Africa, including attempts to bridge the digital infrastructure gap, if there is an infrastructure gap in MENA, and are MENA countries asking China to help them bridge that gap? This is one question that is interesting, I find. Do you have any comments on this one? Anyone who know about BRI?
No, I don't.
I know a little bit. Maybe
okay.
I can answer, but Sharif, do you know? My answer is that no. I don't think that China is trying to bridge this infrastructure gap. I'm not aware of much investment in the digital infrastructure that are undertaken under BRI. BRI has been by China has been mostly towards hard infrastructure, ports, airports, boats, and all of these roads and all of these things, and not much on the infrastructure side. So I don't think this has been a channel used to that. There is another question here by Suhail Kansuh. Says, I wish to raise 2 points for consideration. I wish to hear about technologies as a tool or agent of production, and digitization is not viewed as an end in itself, as we need to eat, get a shelter, and that cannot be virtual. How to ensure that priorities are set right, so as we often adopt the herd system like the gold rush. Then the second question, to what extent will the cryptocurrencies expected to affect growth and inclusion in developing countries? What role for cryptocurrencies to improve growth and have an impact on production and reduce or increase the digital divide? Any comments? Any response?
I think on the on this last question, I think the which is I think pertains to one of your overall questions for the session, which are, what are the really new technologies in this area? And I think blockchain definitely is one of these new technologies. I think the other ones I listed is high performance computing, which is, the supercomputers. Blockchain right now, it's widely used by some emerging market economies, including China and India and so forth. And it is sporadically being used by others. as a safe way of doing transfers of funds and so forth without intermediation, in a secure and permanently and transparently recorded. So that technology is there, but is it being used very widely in developing countries? No. In many countries, perhaps in some of the GCC countries more widely. I think supercomputers are basically monopoly of the US and China right now, and some EU countries. I think out of the 500 top supercomputers in the world, I think probably half are owned by Chinese and about 25% owned by American companies. And the rest is basically in other parts of the world, but very few developing countries have that, besides China, have access to that. And of course, supercomputers are very important for complex calculations and so forth. I think also on data and machine learning, big data and machine learning is a very important area and is developing very, very rapidly. In fact, Stanford University now offers a PhD in economics focusing on data and machine learning. And there are many firms that use this, platforms like Netflix and Facebook and so forth use these technologies. Again, in developing countries, they're not as, first of all, they need expertise. Second, they need supercomputers. And third, they need to have a viable business environment to use it. I think these, if you put these things together, I think the future, of course, is also depends a lot on how artificial intelligence is used. And I think based on work by Asamoglu and others at MIT, it is very clear that up to now, this loss of jobs fear may have been a bit exaggerated based on digitalization because new jobs are being created and so. But he and his colleagues at MIT indicate that artificial intelligence is a game changer, and there will be where a lot of jobs, even those which are not repetitive, could be lost.
Thanks. Any additional comments?
Yeah, I can just give one comment on not so much just maybe the digital divide indirectly, but to have these new technologies is not going to solve the problem that was raised, which is basically we still need to eat, and this is a problem that will stay with us for quite a while, at least in sub-Saharan Africa and maybe some of the countries in the MENA region. Well, there's quite a lot of research now that shows that having access to the new software that you can install on handsets, telephones, computers, etc., is increasing tremendously the productivity of farms. And this is going certainly to help, or should continue to help reducing the food insecurity. Think of just the very well-known case of the arrival of the railroads in India in 1850. When the railroads arrived, you could trade. And after you could trade, whenever there were climate shocks, people didn't die anymore as they used to before. And there's convincing data on that. And I would say that the same kind of situation is brought about by these new digital technologies which are spreading everywhere around the world. So I think one should be much more upbeat about that aspect, because even if you misuse it for social reasons, this will be spreading rapidly. Farms will be more productive, will be in a better position to adapt to climate change.
I want to excellent, Sharif, yes.
Yeah, if I may, just a quick follow-up. I think in the context of MENA, I don't think the problem will be that machines are going to replace people because of the level of innovation that is available and sophistication that is available in MENA. But I think the challenge is to how to upskill the labor and human capital in a way that can better deal with machines. So again, it's not one size fits all. I mean, in other regions, there might be some loss of jobs. I do not think, given the level of sophistication in manufacturing at this point, at least, it's going to be replacing people, but we need to augment the intelligence. I switch it here, IA instead of AI, of human capital, so they can better deal with technology and have technology support whatever they do.
Thank you. That's extremely helpful. If I want to push a little bit the thinking, I think all of you have talked about the technologies. There are many technologies around. I mean, this industrial revolution involves many technologies. If we were to say, I mean, to think about what technology, which technology would be most, if you were going to advise policymakers today, on which technologies should they bet in a typical MENA country like in Egypt or in Tunisia or in Morocco? Is it supercomputers like Sharaf was talking? Is it artificial intelligence? Is it 3D printing? Is it the Internet of Things? Is it fintech, the blockchain technology? Which one of these technologies do you think is the most relevant to be useful, given the structure of the economies, given their engagement in trade in the global value chains, given their whatever it is that structure they have? What do you think? Do you have any insights on this to share?
I just, my 2 cents on this is, I think the focus in MENA has to be on infrastructure, in digital infrastructure, accessibility, and training human capital. That's critical. Secondly, on business environment, I think we should learn from what happened in China. The China's benefiting from digitalization. Actually, they have suffered job losses, something like 12 million job losses due to robotics and so forth, but they have created more jobs as a result of digitalization being used very widely by small and medium-sized enterprises to e-commerce. And I think fintech, the mobile banking and so forth has really increased the percentage of workforce, labor force that is participating. I mean, is able to use the banking system for financial transfers and savings and so forth. So these two combined have had a very significant effect, both in terms of job creation, because small and medium-sized enterprises are the biggest job generators. And MENA is missing on this. I mean, MENA has to focus on these areas that are relatively easy to deal with, but it needs to, one, as Dr. Sharif mentioned, improve the business environment. And then human capital combined with access, affordable access. I think these are game changers for this region, given the very high youth unemployment and, on average, fairly educated youth. This is my recommendation.
Thanks. Jim?
Yeah,
Topher, can I?
Oh, sorry.
I'm coming
sorry,
to you,
actually,
Ibrahim.
because
Do you want to come in now? Are you leaving, Ibrahim? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just 2 seconds.
To take the floor.
2 minutes, because I'm leaving, and I just like the question you raised. Yeah, thank you very much. I think also the MENA region need to focus on the kind of technologies which I think Dr. Sharif alluded to, which enhances government effectiveness. Because there was a recent World Bank study on Uganda, digitalization of the tax system in Uganda. And they found that digitalization of the tax system could actually increase the tax collection by about $500 million for a small economy like that of Uganda in just 2 years. Imagine the impact, say, for example, for an economy like the Egyptian economy, should the tax system is fully digitized. I think the other also aspect that would increase government effectiveness is cash transfers as an instrument for social welfare. Because in many countries, including, for example, Sudan, we found that in Sudan, that in 2017, more than 50% of the cash transfers that was intended to beneficiaries was actually used as bonuses to the employees in the social development ministry. So I think this would be the kind of technologies, responding to your question, that would be very useful and has immediate impact in the region. And I'd like to apologize, I have to go to a meeting, but
Thank you, Ibrahim, for your thoughts and sharing your ideas. Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much the same thing that we just heard, because one of the things we always hear about MENA is, well, you have so much corruption, and then will the possibility for corruption or for capture by the happy few, will that be diminished when everyone has this access to information? And I think what we just heard is exactly the kind of situation where this might help. Now, the second thing I would say is there's quite a literature now that's saying, oh, well, now we're going to have business to consumer or business to business thanks to two-sided platforms. The two-sided platforms means that you will be able for firms to produce exactly what the consumer needs, much better than before. And I think this is quite important for developing countries, including in the MENA region, if only because you would like to have production of consumer goods that are tailored to the needs or to the wishes of the consumer. And this is something which will be made possible, and it was not the case until now.
Thank you. Dr. Sharif, do you have to add something?
Very quickly, I think, and again, I don't want to repeat what my colleague said. You enable the environment, things happen. You just by enabling the environment. And I repeat, the business sector has the biggest potential. Surely the government is an enabler. The services they can offer through e-government and the like, and so on and so forth. And again, it's all about scalability. In the context of Egypt, there are 60 SOE, state-owned enterprises, that offer services. As we speak, they should be offering their services online. If that happens, that's a game changer. But I'm being very careful in what I'm saying. If that happens, that would be a game changer. I cannot agree more. Infrastructure access, and I'm extremely excited about that project that's going to connect the 4,000 villages. It's a $32 billion project, and I think it's going to take at least 10 years. But again, we have to start somewhere. If I go to the point where we mentioned the technologies, I can only think of fintech as a starting point, given the statistics I gave earlier, and I don't want to repeat myself, but not only to get individual having bank account, but also businesses. There are a number of SMEs that are informal is incredible. And again, going to a point earlier raised, that not just about accessibility and engaging in the formal economy, but also taxation and the like. That would be extremely of added value. Something I just read yesterday is a recent published national policy for AI. And one of the main elements of that AI national policy is agriculture, and how a game changer AI, even simple technology deployment for small farmers, which represent over 90% of the farmers in Egypt, can have a fantastic input on the yield going out, and also on the exports. That is one of Egypt's biggest problems. People always look at Egypt and they think of the import is the biggest problem. I do not think we have problems in the volume of our imports. The problem is actually in the volume of our exports, which is way below par. And I think digitalization can help in that as well.
Thank you so much. I think we have a raised hand. Maybe that will be the last question. Somebody would like to ask a question directly. How do you do that, Shireen? How do you give him the floor?
Mustafa, I see your hand raised at the moment.
Huh?
It's your hand that's raised at the moment.
No, but you said that you have
yes, for and Sufyan's, and I'm allowing him the floor now. Sufyan.
Yes, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Marhaba.
You hear me?
Yes, we do hear you.
First of all, thank you very much for the good presentation and for the information. I have some observation and question at the same time. As you know, digital technologies must be incorporated into national strategies. I mean hereby the issue of training and pre-condition for digital introduction to MENA countries, preparation of TFT, that will help to accelerate technological advancement and innovation. My question is that how can MENA exploit the positive side of the coronavirus pandemic? Why? Because everything's now moved to be digitized. Teaching, firm now operating from their home and so on. Here, if you exploit this positive side, we can reduce, for example, the unemployment of the youth. As you know, majority of population in the MENA region, especially in the Gulf countries, under the age of 15 and 25 years, and those at university levels. How can digital technology can be embedded in curricula, for example, in the strategy of teaching and so on. So if you exploit this, now by training, I mean that even in coronavirus, sending people into homes, but without training. I mean by training, we have to make future strategy for training of people on such issues. So by this, we can reduce the unemployment of youth. We will make MENA region also ready for the fourth industrial revolution and the adoption of technology.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I think this is the last question. I would like to give you the chance to respond to this question if you have any comment. Please, Sharaf.
Yeah, I think the issue of this is a very important issue. First of all, in advanced economies, we know that the take-up of digital technology is much higher for younger generation than older. And that has to do with actually familiarity of the younger generation with social media and so forth. And I think the same is probably true in many countries. I think, Mustafa, you referred to very high uptake by young people in the MENA region. And I think social media has a lot to do with it probably, and mobile telephony. So in a way, younger generation has already trained itself to be familiar with some basics of digitalization. I think what is the challenge is the workforce to be educated to use the digital technology if and when that becomes necessary, because people who are not skilled or semi-skilled and they don't have digital literacy, they could lose their jobs if digitalization is introduced in the place of work, even without basically artificial intelligence. Just digitalization needs some basic skills. So, and those skills can be government can play a very, very important role by having a television program that would basically teach some basic skills on television. Most people have access to television, and I think remote instruction and learning has proven to be very effective in some areas, and that could be one way to spread the knowledge as fast as possible.
Thank you, Sharaf. Do you have to add anything, Jim?
No, I agree with Sharaf's comments, and I think several of us, or all of us, made the comment that education is important and that the youth is going to be on the uptake first. Now, I could say that it's very interesting. I live in Mauritius now most of the time, where there's 1.2 million people. Everyone has at least 3 or 4G. It was the first country in Africa to be fully online, and it's been impossible so far to get the government to use this new tool in the school system. They have not changed the curriculum yet. It's pretty clear they have to do it, and it's just there's a lot of inertia, and I find that a bit depressing because it's a country that's done pretty well in many other respects.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Dr. Sharif, your last word.
Well, I'm going to say something controversial in the presence of distinguished academics.
Now, okay.
I think the future is not going to be only about degrees and university degrees and so on, which is something that is big in the region. I think the future is all about the skills and capacities that we gain and how we keep on learning. So lifelong learning, I think, will be the drive, not just the degrees. And I think part of the problem that the MENA region has is that the vast majority of the population have always been obsessed with getting a degree. What to do with it is a different story, but getting the degree. So if we get obsessed of getting the right skills, I think that could be a game changer. And I agree completely with my colleagues.
Thank you so much. I think we're coming to a close. But before we close the session, I would like to ask Dr. Shireen to tell you about the next sessions in this program. Dr. Shireen, would you like to say a few words about tomorrow and the day after?
Absolutely. We've got a series of webinars scheduled for tomorrow and after tomorrow that we'd like to extend an invitation for you to join us for. Tomorrow at 3, we have one on labor markets institution panel, where we have Dr. Tariq Youssef, Dr. Muhammad Marwani, Dr. Sheena Zawi, Dr. Hassan Ali, and Dr. Umar Rani. And then at 5, there's going to be another panel on demography and labor market. And for this one, we're going to be having Dr. Zafiris Zanatos, Dr. Nader Qabbani, Dr. Raghi Asad, Dr. Caroline Kraft, and Dr. Ghada Barsoum. And then on Thursday, it's going to be the final webinar in the series on inequality and labor market panel. And that would be moderated by Dr. Noha Mekkawi, and the panelists would include Dr. Adel Ben Youssef, Dr. Vladimir Halsani, Dr. Paul Makdisi, and Dr. Shahid Youssef. And we're really pleased that this partnership with CPEC has been part of a larger program that's actually going to build on the series of webinars to produce a report for the region. And this report is actually one of a number of reports for the regions in Latin America, in Africa, and in Asia. And we're particularly pleased to be joined throughout with the 2 key coordinators for the program, Megan Balsti and Ramiro Albreo, who's been working closely with us to put together the series of webinars and the report, together with Yasmin and I and Ramaj. So we're really grateful. It's fantastic work. And that also is in parallel to the work that Dr. Mustafa Nabli and Dr. Shahrokh Fardoust are doing with this excellent program we're having with UNDP on the digital transformation. And finally, there's also a 3rd program that we're doing with Carnegie. So digital transformation is firmly on our agenda, and we're really pleased to be able to convene these webinars and to have this fantastic partnerships to add to the discussion and the debate in the region. And with that, I thank you all for a very rich discussion, and hope to see you all tomorrow, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you all, and thanks to the panelists, and thanks to the participants for being with us, and see you next time.
Thank you, Mustafa.
you.
Take care. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Mustafa,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.